Evening, and welcome to the next episode of Prince Hall Think Tank. This is a monthly show where we talk about various topics relating to Prince Hall Masonry. I'm your host for the night. My name is Dave Gillarm. I'm a past master of Mount Pisgah Lodge number 53, where Johnny R. Williams serves as worship master. And I also have the pleasure of serving as the grand historian for the Most Worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Georgia, where the Honorable Bruce A. James serves as our Most Worshipful Grand Master. For the disclaimer, the views and opinions that are expressed by us tonight in no way reflect the views and opinions of the lodges and grand lodges in which we hold membership. And now we'll move to the rest of the panelists for them to introduce themselves. And we're going to start with Brother Preston Collins. He's back with us tonight.
Thanks for that, Brother Gillarm. As Brother Gillarm said, my name is Brother Preston Collins Jr. I am the Worshipful Master of Toussaint Lodge number 19 here in Hamilton, Ohio, under the auspices of the Most Worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Ohio, where the Honorable Carl Williams is my Grand Master. It's great to be back with you guys. I look forward to the topic at hand. Thank you.
All right, next we'll go with now the newly minted past master, James Morgan.
I appreciate you putting respect on that, Brother Gillarm. Good evening, everybody. Happy holidays. My name is James Morgan III. I am a past master of Corinthian Lodge number 18 here in the nation's capital, Washington, D.C., where the worshipful brother, worshipful master Leroy McDonald is my worshipful master. I am also the worshipful associate grand historian of the Most Worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge of D.C. And I would like to thank our 85th Most Worshipful Grand Master, Philip David, the Honorable Philip David, for seeing fit to reappoint me at our annual session this past Friday. It's an honor and a privilege to continue to serve my Grand Lodge. And I'm just so thrilled to be back here on Prince Hall Think Tank once again. And also, I want to make sure I point out a historical event. Exactly 7 days ago, the Cowboys' winning streak was killed by the New York Giants. I just want to make sure I point that out for everybody out there. I know we might lose a couple viewers tonight, but I got to make sure I shout that out. And with that, I'm going to kick it back over to Brother Gillarm.
Yeah, it is always a good day when the Cowboys lose. And next we're going to have Brother Ken Collins.
Good evening, everybody. It's glad to be back with you. I'm Ken Collins. I serve as the Grand Historian for the Most Worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Alabama. I'm a proud member of, Pride North Birmingham Lodge number 319, where the Right Reverend Timothy Sanford serves as Worshipful Master, and Corey D. Hawkins Sr. serves as our Grand Master. I want to shout out to both of them for the long-standing support that they've given us for what we've been doing. This is the last show of the year, so we're glad that everybody could tune in this evening.
All right, thank you for that, Brother Ken Collins. And tonight, the title for tonight's show is Clandestine Masonry, the greatest lie ever told. Clandestine Masonry is an issue that plagues regular Masonry. And to get into what the differences are between what regular lodges are, what irregular lodges are, and what clandestine lodges are, this presentation is going to be given by Brother Ken Collins. After this presentation, you'll get the emphasis on what and what irregular and clandestine is. So I'm gonna turn it over to you, Brother Collins.
All right, thanks, thanks, Dave. In particular, this topic kind of hits home for a person like myself, because I was actually one of the people that came in under the false premises of joining what I thought was a regular lodge. Clandestine Masonry is rampant all over the country, as well as all over the globe. We can't just say that. A lot of people make the misnomer of thinking that it only impacts African-American lodges. It impacts every regular Grand Lodge that there is. The issue that we typically have is it's the density of the major cities that we end up seeing these spurious lodges that pop up. In particular, what we're going to do is I want to take a look at what the different designations are and why we see that actual term coming up in some of our historical documents. So I'll hop over here. and James, if you can you throw me on the main screen? Can you see it?
Yeah, yes, we see it. We see it.
You should be on.
Okay. So, all right. So what we're going to do, we're going to start off with the term regular. A lot of times we hear these terms throughout about regular masonry and regular Grand Lodges, and the term regularity. And the term regular is denoted inside of Kenning's Masonic Encyclopedia and Handbook of Masonic Archaeology, History, and Biography. This is one of the books that came out after Mackey's Jurisprudence. And it essentially says regular, the term regular refers to a lodge or Grand Lodge that is said to be quote unquote regular when it is worked under true, lawful, and competent authority. So essentially, the term regular goes back to a lodge that was made by a competent authority, which basically in modern day terms, any lodge that has a direct lineage to the Grand Lodge of England, the Grand Lodge of Scotland, the Grand Lodge of Ireland, to include the ancient operative lodges that were in Scotland as well. So those lodges that were actually, before they came into the fold, those lodges were actually working, and then they may have joined with Scotland, as well as some of the operative guilds that were as well in inside of England. But then there's also with, if there a lodge came through under France as well. So it's first used in Anderson's Constitutions in 1723, when it talks about when the regular lodges were warned not to countenance a lodge without the Grand Master's warrant. So basically regular lodges, even from the early onset of Freemasonry, we start to see it there. But not only that, we also see it in the 1750s in France, where we're seeing a lot of their writings where they start talking about regular lodges. Now, on the flip side, we have another term that we end up running into, which is the irregular lodge. Now, irregular lodges are something. It's a touchy subject, because a lodge and or Grand Lodge that is said may work under the lawful and competent authority. However, it deviates from the accepted Masonic practices, i.e., they may initiate women. They may not display, or they may not use a VSL. The initiation of candidates, for instance, a regular lodge. A lodge in a regular lodge, say my lodge itself, if my lodge were to open up in a degree and raise candidates, and our charter isn't present, that is considered an irregular act. And those individuals that came in would be considered irregular. That was an irregular act. The difference between irregular is irregularity are things that can be fixed. They can be changed. You can do something to alter that particular action. For instance, with one of the Grand Lodges in France that aren't recognized by the greater Masonic community because of some of their stances in initiating women, not using a VSL, et cetera, et cetera. Those things can be changed if they stop doing that. However, other Grand Lodges, in terms of recognizing them, will deem them as something that's considered irregular. Mm-hmm. But not only that, we also have the, inside of the other bodies, the other rights, we also see it as early as 1762 in the regulations over the right of perfection. We see that the Sovereign Grand Council will recognize as regular no other councils or lodges of perfection than those regularly constituted by itself or by the Grand Inspectors or their deputies, nor any Knight Masons, princes, or perfect Grand Alus that have been made by any council or lodge not duly authorized. So here we see, but then where we seeing it laid out, but we're also seeing it laid out inside of in France as well, inside of the right of perfection. Now, there's another issue that we end up seeing, and this is one of the most prevalent terms that is thrown around, sometimes wisely, sometimes unwisely, by both what we consider regular and clandestine lodges themselves. And it's the term clandestine. Clandestine is essentially a lodge or grand lodge that has no connection and or tie lineage to a competent authority. This can be a grand lodge, and we say competent authority, meaning the Grand Lodge of England, Grand Lodge of Scotland, Grand Lodge of Ireland, and or the operative lodges that were working before the Grand Lodge of Scotland came. So came to be, excuse me. So what we end up seeing, you have lodges or individuals that basically start lodges who have absolutely no connection with Freemasonry at all. They have no connection per se with a Grand Lodge or a competent body, but you can also use the term clandestine in terms of the York Rite bodies, Holy Royal Arch chapters, Royal and Select Masters, the Knights Templar, AMD, to include the Scottish Rite as well, because all of those institutions have to be started by another institution in order to establish it. And that's the connection. That's that one key scheme in terms of Freemasonry that is one of the most important issues. And no matter what ritual that you're dealing with, when a person takes their obligation, the term competent jurisdiction always comes up. And that's one of the premier issues and or conversations dealing with clandestine masonry. If you do not have a connection to a competent jurisdiction, and a competent jurisdiction isn't something that you make up with a couple friends and you establish it. A competent jurisdiction is the premier organization that gives life to the other organizations. Now, there's another category that we end up seeing in a lot of the older writings, and people typically they're trying to understand what this means, but and that term is bogus and or spurious, typically used in the same conversation, but it's a term that's thrown around a lot. And when we talk about bogus and spurious, it's a lodge, Grand Lodge, or other Masonic body, i.e. York Rite, Scottish Rite, AMD, that is clandestine, that has no connection to a competent authority, that was created with the intention to dupe, defraud, and manipulate its membership based upon a concocted narrative to legitimize its legitimacy. So essentially, you have a Grand Lodge, Scottish Rite body, or a lodge itself that has no connection with it, but there's always a story behind it after they become members. This organization was started because XYZ. There's always an explanation with these groups. And what you typically have with the spurious group in terms of the conversation regarding spurious masonry, there's always a political action taking place. This group left because XYZ. Another group left because ABC. You start to see that in terms of the bogus or spurious groups. This group was started because there is a particular ethnocentrism inside of it. Some of the crazy groups that you end up seeing. Some of the other presenters are going to talk about some of the modern free groups, and what you'll end up seeing is this group starts with no connection, but the next thing you know, the group branches off and another one starts. So that's essentially the overview of how spurious groups are defined and identified. The next piece that we're going to look at is a term that you also look at and you hear oftentimes. Is called the act of healing. And healing is the act of righting a wrong, typically correcting an irregular act. And this typically happens in lodges where something occurred that was irregular. For instance, as we spoke of, brothers being raised outside of the lodge without the charter present. Those type of things, brothers going out and making brothers without the proper authority. It's an irregular act, but it can be fixed through what some Grand Lodges. Again, this is not across the board. All Grand Lodges do not use the act of healing. The first time that we hear about the act of healing is in 1722/23, when the Duke of Montague He talks about the to heal the breach, because the Grand Master appointed his own officers when he wasn't actually authorized to do so. So, and we also see the term healing inside of the 1786 Constitution and regulations for the Scottish Rite. So this term of healing is also out there. One of the brothers a brother by the name of Maximilian he was a past junior grand warden in the Grand Lodge of Georgia. He had a healing ceremony that was used by most of the Grand Lodges across the country. I think this occurred in the 1870s, where he wrote a monitor. I think it was at the end of the 1800s that he came up with this monitor that was used throughout the country. And with all of these particular terms, Grand Lodges themselves deem other Grand Lodges regular, irregular, clandestine. The caveat regarding this conversation is a Grand Lodge, no matter how or good intentions they may have, can label another entity incorrectly. Again, a Grand Lodge has all judicial, executive, and administrative rights for their jurisdiction. And for example, the Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Alabama, inside of our Constitution, it states that any Masonic work done outside of the Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Alabama is considered clandestine within our jurisdiction. So inside of our Constitution, it essentially says that the Grand Lodge of Alabama is clandestine. We know that Masonically they are not. However, the rules of our Constitution state that merely because they're looking at the clandestine groups that operate inside of the state, and we currently do not recognize the other Grand Lodge. Therefore, we do not see them as Mason, nor they us. Is that correct? No. However, that's how things happen. Not only that, a lot of times some Grand Lodges may be wooed by individuals that visit. An individual group may come visit a Grand Lodge, want to establish relationships without doing the proper background. Some Grand Lodges have been duped into recognizing what we consider clandestine and or irregular bodies. This happens. We hate that it happens. However, with communication through our CCFCs, through our historians, that's how we can do that. Later on in the episode, James is going to talk about some of the things that can be done to combat that, and that goes through the Conference of Grand Masters, both on the Prince Hall and on the Conference of Grand Masters in North America side. But all in all, the regularity conversation takes place not only on a Masonic level, dealing with the individual Mason who may be studying a particular group and or rite, but it also deals with what the Grand Lodge, who is the ultimate authority for that particular jurisdiction, what they may feel. And in terms of the other organizations, be they York or Scottish Rite entities, the organizations that give birth to the others are the ones that initially establish if an organization or entity is considered clandestine and or regular or irregular. So that's a way that you can also find out on those levels. But on the Blue Lodge level, the Grand Lodge deals with other Grand Lodges. On the Scottish Rite level, the Scottish Rite itself, the parent of the organization ends up giving a designation on if they are, if it was authorized. So that's all I have for now. So if you guys have any questions, please be sure to put them in the on the think tank page, and we'll try to get around to it. Back to you, Dave.
All right, thank you for that, Brother Collins. And as Brother Collins stated, for your questions, feel free to post them in the Prince Hall Think Tank Facebook group. If you saw early, I think yesterday, I put up a post, and all of us are watching that particular post, and that's where we're going to pull the questions from. So feel free to post your questions to that particular post. And one thing I didn't state it, I didn't stay at the beginning of the show, another purpose of this show was to provide information. Providing information about clandestine masonry. The intent of the show was not to bash any particular group or any particular person. It's just to provide information about how some of these groups originated. And to go into the next group, that presentation will be done by Brother Preston Collins.
Thank you, Brother Gillon. I don't remember if it was stated at the beginning of the show, so I'm gonna go ahead and put my own personal disclaimer out here and say that everything that I say as a part of this show or any other episode of the Prince Hall Think Tank is purely my opinion and not the opinion of my lodge or my Grand Lodge. I do not speak for anyone but Preston Collins Jr. Just want to put that out there. So you can't have a conversation about clandestine or bogus organizations without bringing up your so-called AF and AM Scottish Rite Grand Lodges that we see more prevalent within the African American community. And that's who I'm going to talk about. Most of these groups, they'll tell you that they are quote unquote Scottish Rite Grand Lodges, when in the legitimate Masonic world, there's no such thing as a Scottish Rite Grand Lodge. We have Supreme Councils, and you also have what are known as irregular organizations that have a quote unquote Grand Consistory that Scottish Rite Craft Lodges, but those aren't considered legitimate. There are, however, quite a few places, well, not quite a few, there are a couple of places where they have actual Scottish Rite craft lodges where they perform the actual Scottish Rite ritual. And off of the top of the head, the Grand Lodge of Louisiana comes to mind. The Grand Lodge of Louisiana has quite a few lodges that actually practice the Scottish Rite ritual, but there is absolutely no such thing as a Scottish Rite Grand Lodge. Not in the legitimate Masonic world, at least. One of these, we have to mention names of organizations like the General Grand Masonic Congresses, whichever one you decide you want to talk about, because the last time I counted, there were at least 3 General Grand Masonic Congresses, and you had the original General Grand Masonic Congress and the premier General Grand Masonic Congress. That one wasn't real, I just made that up. But claim to have the same lineage, and some of them even go as so far as to claim lineage to some of Prince Hall Masonry's history. They don't teach this to their members, that this is actually the history of Prince Hall Masonry. They tell them this is how we came to be, and this is nowhere near the truth. Most of these groups, they trace their lineage to a man named John G. Jones. And I'm not going to harp on him for too long because we've devoted an entire episode to Mr. Jones and his Masonic shenanigans. But I will say that John G. Jones had the nickname of the father of bogus masonry for a reason. And that's because he was going around setting up these organizations, creating these so-called lodges and grand lodges without the proper Masonic authority to do so. And if you were listening to Brother Collins when he was doing his presentation, that by definition makes those organizations clandestine. You also hear names like H.C. Scott, Dorsey Seville. These men were also doing the same thing, and a lot of times were in cahoot with Mr. Jones with the things that he was doing. But then for one reason or another, whether it be ego, money, or whatever, they would fall out with each other. They would expel each other from their different organizations. And then you would have a new splinter pop-up group. That's how you have these groups known as like the Society of Grand Lodges and Allegiance, which, you know, a name that comes to mind out of that group is a man named Weston Jarvis. Mr. Jarvis is, he does a lot of talking on Facebook, I'll put it that way, about how legitimate his organization is, when in all actuality, it's not. That's how you get organizations like the H.B. Turner, so-called Grand Lodge of Texas, AF and AM, where Mr. Jones is the so-called Grand Master, which that was a splinter group off of another clandestine organization. So as you look at these, there's a pattern where some of these guys started out as legitimate Freemasons, but then for whatever reason, they were suspended or expelled or whatever from the organizations they belonged to. And instead of adhering to that, they decide, well, I'm going to go over here and start my own thing. And then within their own thing, there's another split, or there's another argument, or there's another disagreement. And then you see another pop-up group. That's why at the last time I counted, you have things like the city of Houston alone has over 30 different so-called AF and AM Scottish Rite Grand Lodges, and none of them are legitimate. And that's just in one city alone. So that, you know, and it boggles the mind to think of how many of these organizations are across the country. Also, when you speak of these groups, you also have to mention there's a group of states that have had organizations popped up in their states that call themselves the regular Grand Lodge of whatever state they're in. I know that there's one in Virginia and Georgia, Tennessee, and all of these groups, they trace their lineage to one man, a man named Rui Gabiro. I think I pronounced that right. But this man used to be a member of the United Grand Lodge of England, and he was expelled from Masonry. And following in line with the other gentleman that I just mentioned, he went and he started his own quote unquote Grand Lodge that he named the Regular Grand Lodge of England. And this group has been here in the United States creating bogus lodges and Grand Lodges, these charters, and you know, you see pictures online of these guys with this fancy regalia, new charters, and their members and stuff. And whenever you see pictures of Rui himself, he has this almost devilish grin on his face. And every time I see him, I like to think that he's thinking all the dollar signs that are adding up in his bank account right about now, because really that's all these organizations are a cash cow, really. You know, they're giving people false hope in these organizations, saying that, oh, you're a legitimate Freemason, you'll get to do this, you'll get to do that, you'll be accepted all over the world. Oh, well, our founder came from Prince Hall. We can do everything that Prince Hall can do. Or the biggest one that you hear is, well, Prince Hall Masons only call us clandestine because they want to be the only group of Masons among Black people. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Skin color has absolutely nothing to do with Masonic regularity. That nobody takes anything else from anything that I said tonight, that's the point that I want to drive home. The color of your skin has zero bearing on your Masonic legitimacy. So anytime you hear people, when you have the discussion of Masonic legitimacy, and they want to bring up skin color first thing, or something like the white man stole Masonry from us, that's some of the things they say. Generally, I'd be willing to bet every dollar I had in my pocket that you were talking to a member of a clandestine organization when you hear those words. But I'm not gonna hold up too much more time. I can be kind of long-winded, I know, and this is a topic that I could speak on for the next couple of hours, and I don't want to do the rest of the panel like that. So, Brother Gillarm, I'm gonna pass it back to you. Thank you guys for your time.
All right, thank you for that, Brother Collins. And as you stated, if for all the viewers out there, you can go back and look at the show we did about John G. Jones, and that show was very in depth about his life, legacy, and the stuff he did in the Masonic community. My presentation, which I will go ahead and it's the presentation that kind of hits home. And I say home because this organization is located, well, at least one of the organizations is located right around the corner from my lodge in Columbus, Georgia. No, think about a title for this presentation. I called it like Father, like Son. One what I'm about to say is probably going to be a little bit controversial, but I'm of the opinion that John G. Jones is not the father of bogus masonry. I believe there's a man named Jerry Baxter Baldwin that could easily take that title from him. And in these next couple of slides, you'll start to see why. And the two men I'm going to talk about, they are not biologically related, but one actually mimicked the other when he started his own organization. So the like father, like son, the father on the left is Jerry Baxter Baldwin. He's the founder of what is now.
Dave, click your presentation on.
Oh. All right, am I good to go now?
You good to go?
Thank you kindly. And I apologize to the viewers for that. This was the first slide, like father, like son. And on the left, you have Jerry Baxter Baldwin, who's the founder of what is now Modern Free and Accepted Masons of the World, Incorporated. And you have his son, quote unquote, his son, Reverend William V. Noy Banks, who was the founder of the International Free and Accepted Modern Masons. To get into Jerry Baxter Baldwin, he was born on December 5th, 1879 in Salem, Alabama. Salem, Alabama is a small town that's located in between Phoenix City, Alabama and Opelika. And what the stuff about his early life is the information I found this from, or the source I derived this from, is from Modern Free's old periodical called the Masonic Searchlight. Baldwin did this on, I believe, a weekly or a monthly basis. And in one edition of this, he talked about his early life. So he says that at the age of 10, he worked on a farm. He received $1 a month. At the age of 13, this amount went up to $5. So you see, he came from very humble beginnings. At the age of 16, something clicked. From working on a farm, he saw that he could do this himself. He could run his own farm. So he went to a landowner and asked for some land. Now, this is pretty bold for a 16-year-old, in my opinion. And he asked for some land, and especially when you think about the time that he would have done this in. So the landowner was kind of reluctant to give him some land to have his own farm, but then he later recanted, and he was allowed to run one on a trial basis. So after his experiments with running a farm, he decides that he really wants more out of his life. He doesn't just want to be working on a farm. He wants to get out of Salem, Alabama, and move to the big city. And he does so, and he moves to Birmingham at the age of 19, where he gets married, and he starts working in a coal mine. So as you see right now, everything is pretty normal. Started working on a farm, moved to the big city. Now he's working in a coal mine. Then from there, he goes immediately into organizing the Free and Accepted Colored Masons of America in Opelika, Alabama in 1917. Nowhere in his bio does he state where he became a Mason. Later in court, he states that he was a member of Olive Branch Lodge number 1 in the great state of Alabama. As Brother Ken Collins can attest, who's the grand historian for Alabama, Jerry Baxter Baldwin's name cannot be found anywhere on any rolls. And one thing that was also stated by this particular group is that Prince Hall tried to erase him. So that's why you can't find his name. To give you a small understanding of how proceedings work, if a proceeding is printed in the year 1910, and in 1920, a person is expelled, you still have all those years in between. Now, going from 1920 forward, that person's name is not going to be listed. But 1919 back, that person's name is going to be listed on the returns of those lodges. You can't erase those years of proceedings that have already been printed and sent out to other Grand Lodges. There is absolutely no record of Jerry Baxter Baldwin ever becoming a Mason in any lodge, which is why I believe that he should rightfully have the title of the father of bogus Masonry. Because unlike Jones, was initiated, passed, and raised in a legitimate lodge. He was elected to the office of Supreme Grand Master in 1924. Now, once he's elected as Supreme Grand Master, this is when trouble ensues. He states that at his election, there were members of the Supreme Staff that opposed him being elected. The ones that opposed him, he starts removing them from office. And this causes all kind of turmoil and all kind of drama. And then he says in 1932, he starts putting in new officers, and they turn against him too, including his own wife, who was the Grand Worthy Matron. So all these people in his own organization were all turning against him.
Happy wife, happy life.
And now he states that in 1934, all his opposers were defeated. He goes on to say how people asked him, why did he keep fighting? You got everybody against you. You got your own wife against you. And he says, my vision was to create an organization, a Christian organization for the black race. And that's what he was going to continue doing. But now to back up, he states between 1924 and 1938, the Free and Accepted Colored Masons of America split numerous times. So some of these organizations were called, that split off was Hiram Grand Lodge. I believe there was a Travelers Inc. And a lot of these organizations have now morphed into forming another clandestine organization, which is called Hiram United Sovereign Grand Lodge, which is located in Columbus, Georgia as well. So as you see, Baldwin has no Masonic origin, starts his own entity. That entity splits and starts forming other groups. So now he meets his future son, attorney William V. Banks of Detroit, Michigan. Now, Banks states that while he was in Detroit, he runs into a friend that was operating a drugstore. And this is in his book, Legacy of Dreams. And this happened roughly around 1944, 1945. And this friend states that he needs Banks to speak with his father. His father was located in Phoenix City. After Banks talks to the father, he brings him down to Phoenix City, where he's made a member of the Supreme Grand Lodge, Free and Accepted Colored Masons of the World, which is now the new name of the Free and Accepted Colored Masons of America. Banks was a very smart man. Baldwin knew he had opposers, and he wanted to bring in a fresh face, somebody new, somebody influential. And Banks, right after he's made a member, he's immediately promoted to the office of Supreme Deputy Grand Master, which means now he is the number 2 man in Modern Free. So in 1947, past Grand Master John Wesley Dobbs of the Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Georgia comes to the city of Columbus to inform the public about clandestine groups. So Dobbs at this time was speaking publicly in various cities around the state of Georgia, informing them about what clandestine Masonry is, not to be duped into joining these organizations. So when he comes to Columbus, Jerry Baxter Baldwin was in attendance to hear him speak. And this is Baldwin's own words. It says, after Dobbs finished speaking, he walks up to him to congratulate him on his speech. And once he informed him that he was the Supreme Grand Master of the Modern Free and Accepted Masons, Dobbs refused to be cordial, courteous, anything to him. Dobbs wanted nothing to do with this man. And when reading this, I have nothing to do but laugh, because reading Dobbs' words over the years, this was definitely him. If you were not a legitimate Mason, he wanted nothing to do with you. but it was more important than just about Masonry, so to speak. Dobbs saw these organizations as dividing the African American community, and this was at a time that the civil rights was basically getting to its peak. This is a time where blacks didn't need to be separate; they needed to be working together. And he felt by people starting different organizations claiming to be Masonic, this was, and the Prince Hall Masons at this time were the ones that were actually fighting the fight for civil rights for the African American community. So he probably saw this as people taking away resources, people, and bodies that could be used for other purposes. And now these people are being tricked into thinking that they were Masons. So Dobbs, so after this discourse, and he was asking Baldwin to shut his organization down, Baldwin refused to do so. So in typical past Grandmaster Dobbs fashion, he vowed to destroy Modern Free and every other clandestine organization in the country. So past Grandmaster Dobbs and the Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Georgia takes Modern Free to court around 1951 and wins. Modern Free is ordered to not only dissolve or merge with a legitimate body, they also are enjoined from using any of the signs, symbols, rituals, or anything regarding the Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Georgia. They couldn't even use the word free and accepted in their name. And they had 1 year to basically wind up their affairs or merge with a legitimate body. So Baldwin and Modern Free appeal this decision, and they lose the appeal. They then petition the United States Supreme Court, and I'm probably going to jack up this word, as for a writ, a certiorari in 1954, and this petition is denied. The Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Georgia, after the writ was denied, it seemed like Modern Free kind of went underground for a little bit. Then they popped up at a parade, and Dobbs is made aware of it, and he immediately starts the process on taking Modern Free back to court for contempt. The case was then heard in 1961. It was started in 1959. It was heard in 1961, and the Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Georgia is awarded over $4,400 in damages, and this had to be paid by Baldwin or Modern Free. If he didn't pay this, he was to be placed in jail until it was paid. Now, if you see the picture that's on the screen, this is from the writ of certiorari, and these are words of Jerry Baxter Baldwin. He's the petitioner in this case. And you look in the last paragraph, it says the petitioner made no attempt to prove that it had received any warrant or authority from any duly constituted Masonic group. In fact, the Grand Master petition admitted lack of such authority. So this is Baldwin's own words in court saying that Modern Free had no legitimate origin. So he's admitting in court that they were clandestine, and instead of trying to prove that their origin, he sought to basically try to put a dark cloud on the origin of the Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Georgia, which obviously did not work. So Mr. International makes his move. Baldwin had a plan to basically mimic the United Supreme Council, in which everything above the Mason-Dixon line becomes the northern jurisdiction, everything south becomes the southern jurisdiction. So Baldwin would have the south, Banks would have the north. Banks was a very brilliant guy. Banks was a very brilliant man, very influential. So he starts writing letters to lodges in the south to try to get them under his him, and essentially take away the organization from Baldwin. Baldwin finds out his plans and suspends him. Now, while he's suspended, he's still drawing a salary from Modern Free. later on, either in this episode or probably after this episode ends, I'm gonna upload some of those documents to the group, so you can see Banks on the payroll, and this is coming directly from Modern Free's Treasurer's book. So Banks travels to the state of Delaware, where he incorporates a beauty school. This is just my opinion. I believe that Banks already had the plan to do this. So when he starts a beauty school, that and he figures if Baldwin were ever to find out, all it would look like is he's starting a beauty school. But since his plan was found out, he goes back and changes the incorporation, and what you can see, he adds in a Masonic fraternity and beauty schools. But the scratched out portion that you can see is the original, which states that he originally incorporated a beauty school. So the organization which he started, which would later become International Freedom Accepted Modern Masons, was formed as a beauty school. And then Banks uses Baldwin's model and almost mirrors Modern Free to a T. He uses the name Modern in his organization, calling it the International Free and Accepted Modern Masons. Modern Free was initially using the key, and on the left, that's actually the founder of Modern Free's grave, and you can see the key underneath the square and compass. And so Banks utilizes this key as well. And he also utilizes a national body system. So where you have a supreme body or the national body over the individual state grand lodges. So the son mimics his father to a T and starts his own clandestine organization. And now in the state of Georgia, we have the International Free and Accepted Modern Masons, their Grand Lodge name is Jeff Long Grand Lodge, which ironically, Jeff Long was never a member of International. He was been dead long in the grave before International was even thought of, and he was actually a member of my Grand Lodge. So International splits in Georgia. They form a group called the United Masonic Brotherhood, and they also use the name Jeff Long Grand Lodge. And then United Masonic Brotherhood splits and forms Reformed United Masonic Brotherhood. So you have these groups that pop up and they start breaking off from each other, but they all trace their lineage back to Jerry Baxter Baldwin, who in my opinion is the true father of bogus masonry. So this concludes my presentation on these groups, Modern Free and International. There are plenty of other groups out there. We try to touch on a couple of the larger ones. For the ones that are wondering about the organization called the Prince Hall Origin, as a panel, we decided that the Prince Hall Origin and the National Grand Lodge history is very complex. To try to wrap this up in a presentation of 5 to 10 minutes will probably do it a lot of disservice. So be on the lookout within the next month or so. We will have an entire show dedicated to the history of the National Grand Lodge and the organization and the clandestine organization now calling itself Prince Hall Origin. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Brother James Morgan.
Thank you, Brother Gillon. Man, I don't know how I drew the short straw today. I got to follow behind these 3 excellent Masonic scholars, and I hope I can do well. With understanding this history, again, we dealt with John G. Jones, actually almost, I think it was a year ago, almost to the day. We've just talked about the International Free and Accepted Modern Masons, the Modern Masons of the world, and what was the other one? Scottish Rite groups and different things. The question is, where do we go from here? And this is something that I've contemplated a lot. And so how have legitimate Grand Lodges dealt with these organizations? Okay. There are many different strategies. As Brother Gillarm pointed out and gave us examples of, you had situations where Grand Lodges have actually gone to court over the right to claim legitimacy as Masonic bodies. In some places, they've even trademarked. Legitimate Grand Lodges have even trademarked the square and compass. Okay, and I can't remember the exact states off the top of my head, and I apologize for that. But there are a couple of states where that has actually been done or attempted. In the 1950s and 60s, at the same time period where Brother Gillarm was talking about John Wesley Dobbs taking Jerry Baxter Baldwin's organization to court, you also had a movement within the Conference of Grand Masters Prince Hall affiliation to try to stamp out clandestine and irregular Freemasonry in the African American community. Why do I say the African American community specifically? We have to remember that a lot of the social milieu and politics at this time is still predicated upon legal segregation. Okay, so the idea is that, at least at that time period, is that Prince Hall affiliated Freemasonry is the only legitimate Masonic organization in the African American community, and that's a big deal in part because, again, there's legal segregation going on at that time. One thing that happened that a lot of people are not aware of is the publication of this work right here. This is the Prince Hall Counselor. It's basically a guidebook that was laid out by the Conference of Grand Masters to assist Grand Lodges with taking clandestine and irregular groups to court if they so felt the need. However, as we've seen, this strategy is a strategy and it's worked to some degree, but then organizations change their names and there's all these splinter groups, and I mean and I know in this and I don't mean to put New York on the spot, but I know in New York they have a ridiculous amount of irregular Grand Lodges, and here in DC, I'm sure that there are more that I'm not aware of, but I can only think of maybe 3 off the top of my head. The General Grand Masonic Congress being around the corner from my house. So again, what is the danger? That this is the thing that people have to realize. Okay, a lot of these organizations are formed are mainly money making schemes. My lodge, Corinthian 18, and we're not the only one like this, obviously, but we're a lodge that was originally clandestine. Now, this was 100 years ago, but originally my lodge was clandestine, and those original brothers actually did get healed into Prince Hall Freemasonry and were legitimized. Okay, but let's analyze what was the actual issue. What was the actual danger that they found themselves in? In our history, in my lodge's history, the members who originally started our lodge, Emery Smith, Bishop Edgar A. Love, who anyone who's a member of Omega Psi Phi fraternity would be familiar with him. H.G. Crowder, a number of other Masonic stalwarts at this time. They were young men, mostly in their 20s. A lot of them were students at Howard University, my alma mater, and they actually fell in league with a gentleman named H.C. Scott. Now, H.C. Scott was actually an expelled former Prince Hall Mason. He actually had become the Grand Senior Warden of my Grand Lodge, but he had been expelled with a number of other members of our Grand Lodge, particularly from St. John's Lodge number 12. And I don't mean to put St. John's out there, but there were some issues that were going on there at this time. Now, the reason why I bring this up is because the original founding members of my lodge, when they met with Mr. Scott, they actually told him, they said that they wanted to start a club, a Masonic club, and Brother Gillarm will appreciate this, they stated that in so many words, they wanted to be in the same order of Masons that H.R. Butler was a member of in the state of Georgia. And I think Brother Gillarm is familiar with H.R. Butler, I'm pretty sure, right? we always go back and forth about that one. And so, it sounds all well and good at first because they're told, H.C. Scott tells them, hey, we're all Negro Masons and we're all the same. We all look the same, and it's all well and good. What the members of my lodge could never have known was that they were actually joining up with the John G. Jones affiliated organization. Now, what happens is that one of our members on a trip to his home state of Georgia, one of our original members, actually attempted to visit a lodge, which we now know, I believe it's and Brother Gillam, help me out. I believe it's today is W.C. Thomas 112, but I think at that time they were known as, was it Crystal?
It was originally Crystal Lodge number 112. Now it's
Okay.
W.C. Thomas 112.
Okay, gotcha. See. I remember my lodge. I remember my lodge history. So he actually attempted to visit this lodge, and he was actually stopped, and they said, "No, you can't come in." And he didn't understand why, because he actually knew some of the men in the community. One of the men who actually happened to be there was none other than H.R. Butler, and H.R. Butler knew this young man and said, "Hey, talk to me for a second. Who are the Masons, the prominent Masons that you're familiar with in Washington, D.C.?" And this gentleman was totally clueless as to who the legitimate Grand Master was among Prince Hall Masons, who at that time was Nelson Weatherless. What's the long story short? My lodge was healed, and they rejected their former affiliation, and we became a Prince Hall Lodge. What's the moral of the story? The moral of the story is one of the biggest dangers, in my view, of clandestine masonry is that you're paying for something and you're not really getting what you think you're paying for. Even though these organizations say they're international or they're universal or whatever other type of moniker they want to use. And even nowadays, what you have a situation where, and Brother Oscar Allen has done a great amount of work on this area, is what's happening now is way back when Prince Hall Masonry was segregated against and kind of off into its own corner, even though we knew we had legitimate origins with the United Grand Lodge of England and all that history. So in the late 80s into the 90s, when Prince Hall Masonry starts getting international recognition, as well as recognition domestically with our historically Caucasian counterparts, what's happened now is that for a time period that made Prince Hall Masonry very unique, and of course we were sticking our chests out, and we were proud to say, look, we are recognized. We've been telling y'all this whole time. But what's happening now is you're seeing a situation where a lot of these groups, particularly in the African American community, are now forming alliances and allegiances with clandestine and irregular Grand Lodges in other countries. So for a Prince Hall Mason to say, well, we're recognized by the United Grand Lodge of England, you have some irregular groups out here that are saying, well, we're recognized by the regular Grand Lodge of England, which, although it sounds good to say, well, the regular Grand Lodge of England, it even sounds like, oh, it's just a regular, it just sounds, nonchalantly. But in reality, this is an organization that can be, that's very dangerous in terms of an untrained, unstudied Mason thinking he's going to visit a lodge or thinking that he's affiliated with something that's legitimate when in fact it is not. And the main thing that I think has to happen in order to combat this is simply education. There's nothing beats a good old fashioned education, and also improving the fact that who you are as a Master Mason, it is the truth. When you say, well, hey, this is our origins, this is our history. Brother Preston Collins brought up an excellent point earlier that I was talking about with someone else earlier this week, which is the fact that a lot of these organizations have actually grafted Prince Hall Masonic history onto their origins. And for some odd reason, they particularly like to use bits and pieces of my Grand Lodge history, which I find personally offensive, because what happens is they'll say things like, they like to go back to William H. Thomas with the Scottish Rite, and who was a past Grand Master from my Grand Lodge. And they'll say, well, this was somebody who started us, so this is where we come in at. And I go, well, no, William H. Thomas was a legitimate Mason his entire life, and he was with our Grand Lodge. You guys are grafting some history onto him for a particular reason, in which, I won't bore you with the details of that particular story, but that's what people want to do. If someone wants me to handle that in the question and answer, I'm more than happy to. But that's what they'll do. Or even like Brother Gillon pointed out, which I didn't even realize that this was going on. You said that there was a Jeff Long Grand Lodge down in the state of Georgia. Well, we know that Jefferson Long was a member of the Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Georgia. We know. So why are they doing this? Why are they grafting Prince Hall history or legitimate Masonic history onto their organizations? Well, they're doing it in part to play on ignorance, and as well as to legitimize themselves. And so you have to be very aware of these things. And again, I mean, another thing I want to point out before I close is the fact that although you may be a legitimate Mason or Eastern Star or sister for that matter, that does not give you the right to disrespect anybody personally or what have you. What I find is that oftentimes you have some people who get very proud of the fact that they're legitimate, and so what we like to do is we like to some people like to become disrespectful or what have you. When you have some people who honestly don't know. I have relatives myself, who very close relatives, in fact, who are irregular or clandestine Masons and did not know anything about it. And I had to tell them, say, hey, look, this is, I can't, don't get disrespectful with a person, because a lot of times what you do is you turn them off. What you want to do is you come from a place of education. And at the end of the day, I'm not even, and personally, I'm not even in the conversion business. What I'm in the business of is showing why my organization, why my lodge or Grand Lodge is the best for me. And if you see something in it, and actually I had a relative that actually came to me a few weeks ago, and he told me, he said, well, hey, I want to get healed. I want to become a Prince Hall Mason. I said, well, I thought you were a Prince Hall Mason. What are you talking about? He said he was PHO. I said, oh, well, that's a whole nother discussion. You see what I'm saying? So again, I could have come at him in a very aggressive way, but I said, oh, well, hey, I'm welcoming. I'll give you the information. It's up to you to take that step. So, those are some strategies I just want to make sure I point out. Again, just be respectful of people, because we really don't know where people are coming from. And one of my last points will be this. A brother pointed something out to me that was very, very eye-opening. He said, you have some clandestine and irregular Grand Lodges, particularly in the African-American community, that are very old now. That history that Brother Gillarm and the two Brother Collinses were talking about, this is a very long-standing issue. So you have some organizations where, you have some people who, my grandfather or my great-grandfather was someone like a Jerry Baxter Baldwin. I had a good friend of mine in the genealogy community that she was asking me, hey, can you research my father's history, blah, blah, blah. And I said, okay, sure. And then lo and behold, she had all this documentation, and lo and behold, he's a high-ranking member of the international Masons down in Louisiana. Does that give me the right to disrespect her father? No. All I can do is come from a place of love and a place of respect. And that's, I think, the main thing. And that, to me, is really showing true Masonic virtues. So with that, I will pass it back to the MC, the man of the hour, Mr. Dave Gillarm.
Thank you for that, Brother Morgan. There's going to be a couple additions to my presentation. One of the additions I'm going to talk about is going to include something very interesting in modern free history. My source is from the Masonic Searchlight. This is dated October 15th, 1950, and it's going to be about Esther Poole's address that year. And I'm going to post it, the excerpt from it, in the Prince Hall Think Tank Facebook group. So as you see, this is Modern Free source. And in this portion, she says, I wrote up 31 Masons and 82 Eastern Stars. I charted 2 Masonic lodges, and I charted 1 Eastern Star chapter. So this isn't me saying this. This isn't any Prince Hall Grand Lodge saying this. This is Esther Poole, who was serving as their Grand Worthy Matron, who clearly states that she charted 2 Masonic lodges. And if you Google Modern Free's history, you just, I guess, put Modern Free, Supreme Grand Lodge, Modern Free, and history in your search engine, and read through that history. It also alludes that Esther Poole was doing something with Masons and chartering lodges, and you have her own words stating that she did this. So now we're going to go ahead and open up the floor to some questions.
Dave.
Yes, sir.
We had gotten one, and I wanted to hurry up and knock this one out. That way we can just go ahead and handle it, and that way we'll never have to go back to it again. The question was asked about the Grand Lodge of the Virgin Islands, as well as United Supreme Council, the Slaughter Supreme Council. This think tank has taken a stance of not getting involved in that type of conversation. However, just to get it out there, the Prince Hall Grand Lodges there are some, the vast majority of Prince Hall Grand Lodges have deemed the Prince Hall Grand Lodge of the Virgin Islands as irregular or has not recognized them. There are also a handful that has recognized the Grand Lodge of the Virgin Islands. The stance of the Prince Hall Conference of Grand Masters has not given them a seat yet. According to the United Supreme Council Southern Jurisdiction, the Supreme Council of the Southern Jurisdiction for Prince Hall Masons has deemed the new Supreme Council as a bogus, clandestine, and spurious, as well as it's echoed by the other Supreme Councils of the United States. That's done. That's over with. That's it.
All right. So that solves that. And for this one, I'm going to go from the bottom up since this question was directed to me. And it said, knowing how these guys lie about so much about themselves, have I found any primary or corroborating evidence that Baldwin ever ran a farm in Alabama? This answer is a resounding no. I have not found where Baldwin really did anything in Salem, Opelika, or Columbus, Georgia. And as many of you know, I also serve as the executive director of the Columbus Black History Museum and Archives. The only thing, and if for the viewers out there, if you have an Ancestry.com account, go ahead and search for J.B. Baldwin in Columbus, Georgia. When you pull up the census report about him, it says his profession is Supreme Grand Master. That's the only job that I have ever seen that Jerry Baxter Baldwin held. He was getting paid. That was his usual avocation, was being Supreme Grand Master of Might and Free. Can't find anything he did in the community or anything relative to anything at all. It just seems like his purpose on life was duping people out of their money, making caskets, and selling barrel insurance. Selling barrel insurance and purporting that to be part of this Masonic organization. That's all I found Jerry Baxter Baldwin has ever done. So, all right, to go with some questions. Since the publication, and to brother Kenneth Wade, didn't want to disrespect your first question, but I stated earlier that we're going to do an entire show dedicated to PHO. So that show will answer your questions about that particular organization. It says, since the publication of Brother John Harrison's book, Landmarks of Our Father, it has been said Prince Hall and the 14 other brothers were made clandestinely. What was the key element to rectify themselves?
I'll take that one. Even if, and I say, well, after the making of Prince Hall and the other brothers, even if they were made clandestinely, the fact that they received a charter from the Premier Grand Lodge of England rectified whatever could have been done wrongly to begin with. So once they received that, once Prince Hall received that charter on September 29th, 1784, that effectively erased everything that happened beforehand, because they were now members of legitimate Freemasonry.
That's real. That's real. Hey, Brother Gillon, I hate to skip around a little bit, but I see a question here that actually has struck my fancy. Do you mind if I take it real quick?
Absolutely, sir.
All right. Well, I see a question here in the chat. It says, let me see if I can find it. It says, can the vicious cycle of clandestine masonry in the Black community be linked to a rebellion against upper middle class elitism and colorism? I can't speak to the colorism situation as much. I don't know that that's the case. I've never seen any evidence of that, but I think that the class issue definitely does come into play at certain key points, particularly when you look at John G. Jones. And this is one of the things that I think that has not really been explored too much by Prince Hall writers and historians, as well as even other academics. Okay. And the reason why I say that is this: when you look at that situation, for instance, you have John G. Jones, this very prominent lawyer at the time in his personal. John G. Jones was a very, very prominent individual in his professional and personal life. Let's not let's give the man his due in that regard. And he's at war with Thornton Jackson and some other individuals. And Thornton Jackson was a barber. I mean, Thornton Jackson at one time was the manager of the Capitol barbershop here on Capitol Hill here. So I do think that there was some kind of a class division there. And I do think even with regards to some of these other groups, when you look at individuals like a Jerry Baxter Baldwin or William V. Banks, and a number of others, I think that you have a situation where you really have these guys who, for lack of a better term, are kind of hustling people, and I don't know that they've done outside of kind of running these schemes. I don't know that they have the social capital to enter into some of those halls of professional and personal standing that the typical regular 9-to-5 male or female may be going to. So what they do is they join these groups, or they create these groups to give themselves prominence and stature. And we've all seen, and most of us watching the show are probably members of a Masonic order of some type. The regalia itself is very very beautifully done and handmade and stitched and all this kind of stuff. So that can be a very big ego booster for somebody who's maybe not the best. Now I'm not trying to paint everybody with a broad brush, but particularly at way back when, somebody who may not have the best education and may be butting heads with the culture of the already established Prince Hall organization, which a lot of people have defined as being somewhat middle class of an organization. So I think that there is that kind of a dynamic. I mean, we've also seen in our own lifetime today, you have a high, and this is something that's not really discussed a lot, but you do have a high rate of clandestine Masonic organizations being either started or proliferated within the prison system. Believe it or not. This is another thing that's happened. You have pseudo-religious organizations that have grafted elements or entire systems of Freemasonry onto themselves, such as the United Nubian Nation. They've gone through several name iterations, but basically Dr. Malachi Z. York, if anyone's familiar with him and his group, again, these are people who may be well read in their particular organization's milieu, but they're not necessarily college educated. And not to say, and that's not to disrespect anybody, it's just to say that their level of exposure is not fully what it possibly could be. You have another number of other ethnocentric groups, Moorish, pseudo-Moorish groups. I mean, there's just so many of them out there. I can't even begin to name them all. But I do think you see an element of classism and class division when we're dealing with this issue of clandestine masonry. So,
the one brother did, basically asking why do people stay in, the clandestine groups after they've joined. And honestly, I think there's three answers. One is people have been in so long they really don't care. There's one group of people like that. They've been in so long, they've done so much, they really just don't care. Two, it's there are people that are programmed to believe that they're there for a reason, that they actually believe the narrative that's associated with the particular group. And then the third group is the individuals that have received their 33rd degree, they're past XYZ, they've received all of these titles, and they don't want to give those up. And that's just a reality, because everybody does not heal the particular degrees. I remember when I healed over into the Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Alabama, and then I tried to join the shrine. The deputy of the desert said I could be healed, but the temple said you're going to get created again. And I was literally in the last creation class, so I was like, "Oh my God!" Now they've ended it afterwards. But that's a reality that we also face with people that are in those groups, because there are people that will sit up there and argue with you till they're blue that they know that their organization was started XYZ way, and they don't care. Why can't they say, why can't you just respect us? But at the same time, I believe that a lot of the regular Masons we end up seeing and falling into the conversation of, if you are really practicing what you consider Freemasonry, the part of your obligation that talks about interacting with regular Masons, and also the establishment of grand lodges, or lodges from a competent jurisdiction. So when you can just go up and go to the this is literally how a lot of these organizations start. They write up letters of incorporation. They go to the Secretary of State's office. They get a business license. Now they consider themselves a chartered Grand Lodge. And that's one of the ways that in my experience, those are the three classes of people that end up staying inside of those organizations. And then the fourth class are the people that literally don't know.
I want to piggyback off of what you're saying, Ken. I agree with you 100%, but I also think there are two other groups of people that you need to add. One of those are the people who join those organizations because of their blood relatives that may happen to be members of these organizations. And they remain there because their entire family are members of those organizations. And then also, last but not least, you have to add in the people that, because we all know that most of these organizations, there's a very vigorous hazing process that you have to go through. And a lot of people stay in these organizations because they're afraid that when they come to legitimate Freemasonry, that they're going to be hazed all over again. And so because of that, they stay where they're at. I just wanted to add those two to what you were saying.
Also, if I can jump back in just real quickly, I do want to make sure because we highlight the fact that for years, the Phylaxis Society, in concert with the Conference of Grand Masters, has been conducting studies and research on the issue of clandestine and irregular Masonry, and they've kept an ongoing database of tracking these organizations, whether they've been continuing or if they've fallen apart or what have you. So definitely check out those resources as well to learn more about them. I see we got a question in asking about what is the straight to the point way to explain to these groups that when they ask, how is my organization bogus? Well, it varies, but the main thing again is you have to look at, are they irregular in practice, irregular in origin, meaning and usually that's really the big one. I mean, a lot of these organizations typically, you can find stuff on Masonry online and stuff. Generally they'll say, yeah, we do all the same stuff. Yeah, but the question is, do you have legitimate lineage back to one of those three legitimate mother of Grand Lodges, Grand Lodge of England, Ireland, or Scotland? That's usually the one that really gets people. And as Ken said a second ago, a lot of these organizations have legal incorporation documents. Yes, you have a business license, but a business license does not indicate a Masonic authority to work. That does not indicate competent jurisdiction. So you may have a legitimate business license or a 501c3 or LLC or what have you. Great, good for you. But that does not equate to a Masonic charter and to legitimate lineage in Freemasonry. Some organizations may have that, but they're regular in practice because they they have women or atheists or some of those other categories that we do not in the legitimate Masonic world do not these groups do not qualify. And it's no disrespect to women or to atheists, but that's just not what Freemasonry, as far as we understand it to be, that's not what that's about. So again, it varies, but I would just say to really delve into and show them and say, look, show me your history of your organization and let's test it. If you say that this is where your organization came from, let's test it. And, and as I pointed out earlier, and I've met several individuals like this where they've been in an organization and said, oh, I'm a member of such and such a Grand Lodge, and they try to go to a legitimate Grand Lodge to visit or what have you, and they can't. And we as Masons and Eastern Stars know visiting and interacting with other members is very important to your experience. So just be mindful of that.
One other, before we get into another question, one thing I want to address, this was kind of explained during our disclaimer. So for the viewers out there, we can't address why a particular Prince Hall Grand Lodge or all the Prince Hall Grand Lodges do or don't do a certain thing. or why the Prince Hall Council of Grand Masters does or doesn't do a certain thing. We can't speak for either one of those entities, so we have no control over why they do something or why they don't do something. The best way to get those type of questions asked is to go directly to that particular Prince Hall Grand Lodge, or go to the Prince Hall Council of Grand Masters and ask them why they do or don't do something. I just don't have enough rank on my collar to answer some of those questions.
Lies in the seat, Dave Gillon. We know you got the you got the answers, Dave. We know you got the answers.
One other question. Go ahead, Brother Collins.
No, there's a question here posted by my good friend, Sister Christine Hackett out of California that I wanted to touch on. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but Sister Hackett asks, she says, regular lodges have coexisted with an unlimited number of spurious bodies since the 18th century and possibly before then. Why is there so much passion put into combating clandestine masonry when it's clearly unpredictable and uncontrollable? That's a very good question. Once again, I'm only speaking for myself. I'm not speaking for any Masonic Grand Lodge or Conference of Grand Lodges or anything like that. But in my personal opinion, I don't think that it's about combating them. I think it's more about educating the masses. Like, I tell people all the time that I'm not in the business of trying to get anyone healed. If you're happy where you're at, where your membership is, then by all means, stay there. That's your right as an adult. That's your right as an American. That's your right as a human being to do what makes you happy. However, understand the fact that I also have the right to tell you the truth about the organization that you belong to. So you can remain a member there. I'm not here to shut down any organization or anything like that. But what I am here to do is to give the members of those organizations the answers that their organizations will not give them, to tell them the truth about the subjects that their organizations will not tell them the truth about. And that's all I got about that. Hopefully I answered your question satisfactorily, Sister Hackett.
Good. And if I could hop on, just piggyback on that one too, is that clandestine masonry is absolutely nothing new. This is nothing new. Bogus masonry, it's nothing new. It may be in our backyard, but it happens. I think the year, and again, I'm just trying to go off the top of my head, I think it's 1426 or 1436 maybe. Atchison's Lodge, from their lodge minutes, they talk about a Cowan. A brother there's a Cowan that's doing work. And they basically lambast. I think they hired the Cowan again. I'm just trying to remember the story, but even as early as the 1400s, you have individuals that are faking being Masons doing the work, even though it's more of the operative side versus the Freemasonic side. That this is nothing new, and the scariest part about things today is that the education component dealing with Freemasonry is the men that can harm regular Freemasonry the most are regular Freemasons into duping good brothers into joining clandestine organizations. Because if we think about John G. Jones was a trusted Prince Hall Mason. He was a respected, revered Prince Hall Mason who ended up essentially opening the floodgates to all of the General Grand Masonic Congress organizations. So that's a reality that we have to face, that this was a legitimate Mason that ended up doing this. So again, there's nothing new under the sun, and we say that for a reason, that clandestine masonry has been a part of our past, and it will be a part of our future. And as long as you have these degrees and high titles and beautiful regalia, people will always try to wear them.
All right. Next question is, what comparable successes and this is from my good friend and brother, the president of Alaska. um, what comparable successes or failures have our mainstream counterparts had with combating the same thing?
Woo, that's a good question. I like that one. Yeah, here's the thing about clandestine masonry. A lot of time, and this is something I don't like, and I'll be honest with you guys. I'm gonna the other three panelists might kill me for this, but I'm gonna give you guys a little background on how we operate on Prince Hall Think Tank here behind the scenes. Just let's pretend like they're not even here. Just me and you talking. This episode is one of those ones that we knew we kind of had to touch on and deal with, but I was very ardently against early on, saying, "Hey guys, let's do some other episodes and do things first before we get to this topic," because what I find is that oftentimes clandestine and irregular masonry is highly racialized, and I think somewhat unfairly. Okay, clandestine, and this is a message to the historically Caucasian so-called mainstream Grand Lodges out there, brothers that might be listening. Irregular Freemasonry is not just a Prince Hall problem. It's a Masonic problem. And it's not even just an American Masonic problem. It is a Masonic problem. Okay? I want you to hear me loud and clear with that. Now, granted, a lot of these groups in the United States may look like Prince Hall Masons, and they may have leaders that were former Prince Hall brothers, or what have you, or they may just all happen to be brown skinned, and you can't, fine, whatever. But at the end of the day, and I've even heard one Grand Lodge, I won't say the state, but I've heard of one Grand Lodge that recently said, well, the reason why they don't recognize Prince Hall is because there are so many Black Grand Lodges. So basically what they're saying is, well, they all look alike, right? But that's another story for another time. To answer the question, though, what I have found in my study is that a lot of these Grand Lodges have taken the approach early on. They were very aggressive against clandestine masonry, what they deemed to be clandestine masonry, which at that time also included Prince Hall Freemasonry. But over time, what I have found is that they've kind of taken an approach of absorbing these organizations over time, or making them totally irrelevant because of their many charitable works. I think that, and this is something that I really hope a lot of our Grand Lodges learn from, is the idea of branding your lodge and your Grand Lodge in your community, so that the community knows, hey, those are the Masons that we want to deal with. Those are the Shriners that come every year, and it's all about branding in your campaigns. And that's why I've told people oftentimes I'm really not into analyzing and debating back and forth about where a clandestine group came from. I mean, there's all kinds of social media groups and things, and that's all well and good. But I'm more in the business of building up legitimate Freemasonry, of building up Prince Hall Freemasonry specifically. And I think, and the reason why I've taken that approach is because that's what I've seen work with our counterpart Grand Lodges oftentimes. I mean, there are irregular groups that are not predominantly African American. People don't realize it, but there are. But a lot of times they're not stigmatized or attached to the so-called mainstream Grand Lodges in the same way that these irregular groups are. And there's been some individuals out there who have said, well, irregular masonry, Prince Hall is to blame for irregular masonry. No, that's not true at all. That's not true at all. It's my sincerest hope that instead of just, and I'm not disrespecting Grandmaster Dobbs, but I am saying, instead of just taking these groups to court or trying to get these guys healed or healing lodges over, which is all well and good, I say, hey, get in your community, your local leaders, your religious organizations, your civic organizations, partnering with them, partnering with the local college, university, local library system to put on presentations about who your lodge is. If your lodge has been in that community for 150 years and nobody knows about the great things you guys have been doing, that's a problem. That's a problem. And then you wonder why these irregular groups can come over and do certain things. Well, because you're not branding yourself properly. And maybe that's an episode we can have in and of itself for another day. But I'm gonna cede the floor back and pass it on. But I just want to make sure I jumped in on that, because that's something I'm very passionate about.
And James, I'm glad that you actually said that, because I'm on the opposite end of the spectrum in terms of that same conversation, because Prince Hall Freemasonry is well known, and throughout a lot of the communities. Don't get me wrong, everybody doesn't necessarily know about them. I can say for myself, my uncle happened to be one of the past Grand Masters of Indiana. I moved to Alabama. I want to join the Prince Hall Grand Lodge. I actually wound up calling the Grand Lodge of Alabama, and they said, well, you need to join the Prince Hall Grand Lodge. That's the Black Grand Lodge. And I was kind of confused because I thought the Prince Hall Grand Lodge was the only Grand Lodge. So what ends up happening is I end up running into a brother while I'm at school, and I just happen to run into him while I'm at work, and I'm thinking that he's Prince Hall. And when I talk to him, all right, all you got to do, get your money, get your application, fill your application out, be at XYZ place. And the next thing you know, I'm getting beat, and I'm getting a bunch of degrees that aren't worth a flip. And what we also end up seeing also is that there are brothers. I mean, like you said, it happens on both sides. The difference is actually what we consider the mainstream Grand Lodges stopped doing their litigation in the 1800s versus us picking up the litigation in the 1900s. If you look at the Cerno Grand Lodge, there was the Cerno system of their Supreme Council. Cerno was going in the states and taking lodges from the Grand Lodge of Ohio, for instance. There's a case, there's a Supreme Court case in the state of Ohio where the Cerno guys are actually going in and taking over lodges. So they had the same issues that we're having. However, they dealt with it, and they ended up getting it going to the Supreme Court, where they had members on the Supreme Court. So the issues that we have are exactly the same. Just like you were saying, James, that it's not a person of color thing dealing with clandestine Freemasonry. We have what is the Grand Lodge of the United States? You have which is clandestine. Then you also have what we consider the irregular Grand Lodges, the Ladroit Human. You have those the female co-masonry groups, which are considered irregular in the United States by both the Prince Hall as well as the mainstream Grand Lodges. So it's not just a African American / minority thing. It's the entire Masonic community thing, and I just think that we need to recognize that and not just pass it off to us. But the one thing that I do believe is that the mainstream Grand Lodges, they don't attack it as much as we do, because their membership is coming in at such a steady pace that they don't have to deal with it at all. Whereas we end up having to deal with it because some of the individuals that we interact with in our common lives.
Thank you for that, Brother Collins. I believe we definitely went over time, and we're going to have to look at wrapping this up.
Maybe we'll do a part 2 if they're nice to us.
Yeah. One other item that was kind of mentioned about states that have laws against portraying yourself as a Freemason. I believe Connecticut has one. I'm not 100% sure about Kentucky, but I know one particular organization, it was banned from operating in Kentucky. And I do not believe anything has changed. And right now, modern, free, and accepted Masons of the world, it's still illegal for them to operate in the state of Georgia. But just because there's a law out there doesn't mean that somebody's going to follow it. Then you have to have somebody to enforce it. It's illegal to sell drugs in states, but you still have drug dealers on a lot of corners. So just because there's a law doesn't mean it's going to stop. And now we hope that that you learned something from tonight's show. We tried to provide information as on various groups, and we tried to cover the clandestine groups that plague the African American community, as well as non-African American clandestine groups around in the United States and around the world. As Brother Morgan stated, we may end up coming back to this topic at a later date. And for all the questions that we were not able to answer on the show, we will be answering those in the group. So first, we're going to have parting comments from Brother Collins. Brother Preston Collins. Had to be specific.
I was like, which one of us you talking about? Once again, great discussion, guys. This is a bittersweet moment for me. I'm gonna go ahead and take this moment and let it be known to our viewers that this will be my last episode of the Prince Hall Think Tank. And Brother Morgan, Brother Gillon, my cousin from another grandmama, Brother Ken Collins. I want to thank you guys for allowing me this opportunity to share some of these discussions with you. I love all of you brothers, and I mean brother in every sense of the word. You know, we've laughed together, we fought each other, you know, we've cussed each other out all behind the scenes, but that's what brothers do, and I enjoy the discussions. I enjoy the camaraderie that we've shared, and I look forward to those moments going on into the future, because just because I won't be on the show anymore doesn't make you guys any less my brothers. How fitting for me to end I started my time on the Prince Hall Think Tank on the show we did about John G. Jones, and I'm ending my time on the Prince Hall Think Tank on the show about clandestine masonry. I can't think of a better way to walk out. So once again, thank you to all of you for having me. Thank you to the viewers out there for tuning in and making the Prince Hall Think Tank what it is today. I want to wish a Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year, and a Happy Holidays to everybody out there watching. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Brother Collins, and you will surely be missed. This may bring the end to the reign of having Ohio Prince Hall Mason on the Prince Hall Think Tank, unless we having our fingers crossed for the return of Brother Antonio Caffey. And we definitely enjoyed your contributions to the think tank. And as always, I got your phone number, so touch in the future. And next we're gonna have part comments from Brother James Morgan. Sorry, Pathmaster James Morgan. I don't want to get any hate
Once
messages
again,
later.
I appreciate you putting some respect on that. I appreciate it. Well, first of all, to Brother Preston Collins, sir, it's been an honor and a privilege to have worked with you in this capacity for so long. You know, I mean, what can I say? You know, we often, you know, we often crack jokes back and forth, but at the end of the day, the love is definitely felt here and reciprocated back to you and your family as well. I wish you the best on your future endeavors. I would like to say to our viewers again, thank you all for riding with us. We're over a year old now as a show, and we plan to keep on going strong. We've got some great ideas and things coming down the pipe that you know, you guys just have to stay tuned for. You know, I want to definitely let everybody know that I hope you have a safe and happy Chris Mahana Kwanzaa. You know, Happy New Year to everybody as well. I'll be down in Dallas, Texas this week for the you know, for the holiday season and everything. So you know, hopefully I'm just, you know, pray for my safe travels and safe return. And I look forward to seeing everybody. Also, before I let you go, I'd be remiss if I did not mention the fact that at our 168th annual session here in the District of Columbia, we released the history of the Most Worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge of D.C. from 1822 to 2016. This work was written by my good friend and brother, Alton Roundtree, and past Grand Historian Alonzo Tahuti Evans, who was a previous guest on the show. This is a monumental work and a work of personal love and care for a number of reasons. I actually served as an assistant researcher on this project, and I was accredited as such in the book. So I'm just honored and privileged that they thought highly enough of me to put me in there. And the book is $55 to purchase, and I will make sure that I post the information on the Prince Hall Think Tank page. I was trying to find the flyer, but I can't. I stuck it in there somewhere. But I'll make sure to post the information on the Prince Hall Think Tank Facebook page, as well as on the YouTube page for anybody who wishes to purchase a copy. Again, that's $55, and you know, you can't go wrong with it. So with that, happy holidays to everybody.
All right, thank you for that, Past Master Morgan. And last, we're gonna have Mr. Alabama, Brother Ken Collins.
Well, everybody,
God,
we know that Alabama won the SEC championships, and we're headed to the BCS playoffs. But no, we have to end this thing on a good note, brother Collins. We're glad to have you. It's been a great year, and you know, the conversations that we had both online as well as offline. Everybody's got nicknames. People don't know that out there in the interwebs. That everybody has nicknames, and we have a good time with each other. But again, these conversations that we have, they're a lot of fun, and we put a lot of effort into bringing these to you. And you know, we miss Brother Kafee, and we our glorious and noble founder. We want him to come back, and there's always a slot for him when he's able to come back. But at the same time, you know, the work that we're doing, we hope that everybody got something out of it. We hope that everybody has had a productive Masonic year, and we're looking forward to next year. So keep your ear to the ground, because we have some good stuff coming up soon. Have a happy New Year and a Merry Christmas, as well as Happy Kwanzaa and Hanukkah. Peace.
Once again, I want to thank everybody for your support over this last year. We tried to hit on some topics that would interest everybody, and hope that you all got something out of the topics that we discussed so far. Starting off next year, we're looking at getting into some more quote unquote controversial stuff, but it's topics that need to be discussed. To go back in another note, I want to ask everybody to for your prayers. What's that, Pastor Morgan?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
I want to ask everybody for your prayers, and keep Derrick Rose healthy. We need him in every game. We need your support to cheer for the Knicks. And
I'm sorry, bro. That's not gonna happen.
You know, it's very appropriate that you mentioned the Knicks when we're doing the show about clandestine organization.
That's exactly right. You know what? That's exactly right. And matter of fact, I'm thinking as soon as you are starting to pray for him, I'm thinking he's falling down some stairs right now and tearing his quad or something.
And brother Errol Simpson from my lodge, he beat me the other day in 2K17 while I was playing with the Knicks, and I had to go back to the drawing board. So as you see here, this is techno basketball for Sega Genesis. I went back to the drawing board to start playing with my Knicks, and I'm gonna go back up through the years, and next time we meet again, it's gonna be on and popping. I will not let that loss. That loss isn't sitting well with me at all. Wow. But back on a serious note, thank you all for tuning in and your support. I want you to have a happy holidays, and for the topic for next month's show, we're still kind of up in the air on it, but we're kind of about 70% on this. In the early episode, we talked about incomplete brotherhood. Basically, the non-recognition between the state Grand Lodges and the Prince Hall Grand Lodges. And we were looking at delving into this a little deeper, but we're looking at this from a different angle on what it is like to be, and the state Grand Lodges were predominantly white, and the Prince Hall Grand Lodge were predominantly black. So what was the experience of like, what the experience is like of being a member of a state Grand Lodge, a non-black person who's a member of non-white person who's a member of state Grand Lodge, and a non-black person who's a member of a Prince Hall Grand Lodge. So we want to look at what those experiences are like. But as always, feel free to hit us up with your questions, your comments, and we look forward to seeing you next month. Have a good night.